In other news,
to determine why and how the towers collapsed.
It's scary to have this helicopter hovering around.
You walk up to them and confront them. They can't stand that.
Welcome to Another News. I'm Jeff Brady. Orgone energy has been described as a biological energy in living substances that can coalesce to create organization on all scales. Within the microscopic, it's called bions. And within macroscopic structures, orgone energy would manifest within clouds and to even larger forms, such as galaxies. In this last decade, the science and interpretation of orgone has branched out into various groups and has taken the form as an international effort of people crafting their own pieces of orgonite made from crystals, metallic shavings, and resin. There's a formula to this, including modifying Wilhelm Reich's work in creating tower busters. We get another perspective of the orgonite world from a group called QuebecOrgone. Lydiane at QuebecOrgone took over the business a few years ago. Since then, she's been making Orgonite, devices such as Implant Killers, sucker punches, and Orgonite pendants. QuebecOrgone products are uniquely made by Lydiane and often tailored to certain customers. As past guest Roger Tulsis with bugsweeps.com pointed out, wireless routers account for a lot of the electronic harassment calls. Meanwhile, the complacent acceptance of a microwave-saturated environment continues to alter human cognition and behavior. There are two types of orgone energy: positive orgone radiation, POR, and deadly orgone radiation, DOR. Wi-Fi signals are among the major sources of deadly orgone radiation, and properly made orgonite can help dispel that DOR. As we've discussed on this show, working as an etheric warrior is usually not without strange interference, government infiltration, and odd experiences. Lydiane with QuebecOrgone.com joins us today from Montreal, Quebec, Canada, to discuss her work and share some intriguing stories of interference. Lydiane, welcome to Another News.
Hi, Jeff.
Lydiane, what sparked your interest into orgonite and other similar devices?
2 years ago, I met the previous owner of QuebecOrgone, and she introduced me to Orgonite and other devices as it went. When I took over the business, some devices she was not selling anymore, and I asked her to show me how to make them. So because I believed that it could work, and I knew that it was working because of what she told me, but I wanted to test for myself. So as it went, I started making new devices that were not on the website anymore and test them on myself and made them available again to customers.
You're new to Orgonite, in essence. Before you purchased the business, you weren't necessarily aware of Orgonite as much?
Exactly. I knew what it was. I've heard about it. I've researched it a little bit, because at some point in my life, I thought it would be something that would help me, but I kind of like brushed it aside. But when I met the previous owner and she told me she was making Orgonite, I got really curious, and I was like, I want to learn how to make Orgonite.
You started to make Orgonite. Now, we've had on Don Croft and Carol Croft, and they explain how to make Orgonite. But there is a recipe to make basic, effective, tactical orgonite. Can you share that with listeners?
Yes, the recipe to make a tactical orgonite is simple: is resin, metal, and crystal.
What any proportions that you recommend?
Usually, it's important to have a 50-50 quantity, so 50% resin and 50% metal. To my understanding, is that the orgonite piece has to be filled with metal, because oftentimes you'll see on eBay, even on internet, a lot of vendors pretend to make orgonite, but it's not really orgonite because there's no metal in it, and the metal is what makes the orgonite orgonite. So it's very important that when you look for orgonite or you purchase some orgonite or you make your own orgonite, that you have a good quantity of metal in the device for the device to be effective.
I learned about this realm and what other people are making orgonite that's not quite as effective, or it's not effective at all, and they use plastic in it. What do you think's going on here? Do you think that's a diversion tactic to pull people away from this?
Absolutely.
Oh, you do? You think, okay, it's not.
Absolutely.
Can you explain that?
I think there's a lot of misdirection when it comes to orgonite, and it really works, so it's in the advantage of whoever is in control to, take us away and mislead us when it comes to orgonite. And sometimes customers call, and sometimes I hear things, and to me it's funny because I don't research that much when it comes to orgonite. I mean, every week I learn new stuff from reading from the Etheric Warrior Forum or from viable sources, but sometimes customers or people call me with like weird ideas, and I said, "Oh, I've never heard about that," And I said, "Where did you get this idea?" "Oh, it was on the internet and all." And I say, be careful with all the misinformation that there's out there concerning orgonite. I think there's a lot more misinformation than real information when it comes to orgonite, especially online.
Yes, I remember Don and Carol and some of the Etheric Warriors on ethericwarriors.com were warning about that. And as some of the listeners know, it was a very different site. And since July of last year, their webmaster had passed away in a very strange circumstance. And then within a couple days, the Etheric Warriors website was hacked and taken down. Luckily, some of it was salvaged. Do you have any thoughts on that, Lydiane?
Yes, I mean, I think it's really unfortunate too. I'm on the same page as you, and I would often refer to the site for instructions, or there's a lot of testimonials out there also, and whoever was curious about making their own orgonite, or I would always redirect them to the Etheric Warrior Forum. I say, if you want to learn about orgonite, that's where it's happening. So I think it's very unfortunate that the website got crashed, and we lost a lot of information, valuable information. Eventually we're going to be able to rebuild the website and have it the way it was before.
The webmaster in particular was a professional at this work, and he really went to great lengths to maintain the security of that site from hackers, and every member was specifically vetted through Don Croft. Not only that, but he had a particular format that you rarely see. Well, speaking of interference, that's something a lot of etheric warriors are not without experiencing, especially if they're making a very effective orgonite and those types of devices. What types of interference have you experienced as a result of gifting orgonite or maybe using a sucker punch?
Yeah, I would say distributing orgonite being an orgonite vendor, you're already at risk just by being an orgonite vendor. You cannot be an orgonite vendor without having interferences. It kind of like comes with it. I can say I've experienced, I guess, all forms of interferences. I can see maybe technological interferences, but also real life interferences.
Would you walk us through a couple stories of real life interference?
Yeah, that happened to me, or interferences, but also attacks. I think a year ago, I remember I was just going for coffee with my friend, and there was a dog on a leash, and I passed by the dog, and the dog jumped on me and bit my hip. And I was really shocked by what was happening, and I stayed there and wait for and I started shouting, like, where's the owner of that dog? Where's the owner of that dog? And the owner arrived, and I mean, she was like a robot. No emotions. Really a great tone on her face, and no emotions at all. So to me, that was like a physical attack, if I can put it that way. Maybe it doesn't make sense for other people, but as an etheric warrior, when you get attacked, you kind of know it. There's that sixth sense that, oh, I'm being targeted. And the day after that, and I went home, and I didn't decide to take action against the lady. I said, okay, you know what, let's just go home. And I was kind of like, it was a bad bite. I should have maybe called the cops, but I say, okay, if this is an attack, then the cops are not going to be so helpful. If I'm being targeted right now, I should just go home and work on myself, on strengthening my aura and so on. So I went home and went on with my day. And the next day, I was downtown with some friends, and we were just walking back to the metro we attended a small event, and some guy just started like shouting at us. And I picked a fight with him, and it just went on and on and on. And I was like, I went home and I really started thinking, what's happening? Every day there's like something wrong. I seem to be at the wrong place at the wrong moment. And I remember at that time I had a roommate. He was a sort of psychic, and he told me, you didn't have your sucker punch with you. And I said no. And from then I started carrying my sucker punch with me. So if you find yourself being in the wrong place at the wrong moment too often, you might be the source of some sort of targeting.
Those are really interesting examples because a lot of people would look at that and say that's what you experience in life. And if you're in an dense urban area, you're going to run into those situations. But I like how you pointed out that when you examine it and you are an etheric warrior, there's another element to this. If you would, Lydiane, can you explain what a sucker punch is? Because you sent me one to use, and it was very effective on a couple of situations. I almost didn't believe it was happening, but it does work. It's the oddest looking thing. But if you could you explain that to listeners?
Okay. From my understanding, the sucker punch is just the crystal. So you have the little zapper box, and that's connected to the crystal. The crystal is acting as an amplifier, and the zapper is generating the 15 Hertz frequency, which is the same frequency as the Duncroft zapper, which is the frequency we use to repel parasites.
Just a little more detail here. So it's the zapper box, but it does have a little adapter for AA batteries to be placed on there. Then there's an RCA output connecting a wire to a large, a decent size quartz crystal that is that a Mobius coil that's around it?
Yes, it's a Mobius coil.
A coil that's kind of glued around the crystal itself, and then you can either and so you turn it on. There's a LED light that indicates that it's on, and then what? And
then again, in my understanding and experience, you kind of become untargetable, undetectable. It's like parasite can't detect you anymore. And if you find yourself being, the sucker punch is also good if you're doing some boosting work, some energy work. Let's say you've been attacked all day and you want to get back at your attackers. So you're going to, let's say, in your bed, you're going to start maybe meditating or boosting your attackers with your heart chakra. You kind of boost them. This I've learned boosting from from Dooney. You had her on your show a while ago. She has a lot of interesting and useful tips for etheric defense. So the sucker punch is going to bring you some clarity also. And you can aim it at your attackers and they will go away within minutes.
You had a really interesting story about using the sucker punch at a certain residence. And could you explain or describe that one?
Oh, yes. I live right next to a music studio, which is a big building. And, with music comes drugs and alcohol and so on. And when I moved there, I live the building right next to the music studio. So I would have people standing on my porch at any day, at any hours of the day, drinking, smoking, but it was obviously disturbing to me. I like to be home and not have people being loud on my porch. So at some point, I decided to aim the sucker punch at the front of my door. And since that day, I've never had any problems again. No one ever came to sit there ever again. I never had to get out of the house and be like, "Hey guys, can you leave?" And the sucker punch took care of it. And whoever comes to my house is always calm. And I've never had how can I say this, somebody parasitic coming into my house.
Lydiane, really good testimony for the sucker punch. Have you heard from some of the customers others similar stories about using the sucker punch?
Yes, I had a client. She told me she wake up and she was getting attacked in her dreams. And she woke up and turned the sucker punch on and kind of used it as a sword. I thought that was really cool. Fight off her attackers.
Okay, so that was effective for her. Any others that you can recall while we're talking about it?
Maybe not for now. Have more, and usually people will get a sucker punch and they get a sucker punch and they leave it on, and that takes care of the problem.
It's so intense. I agree, and that's exactly what had happened. For one of my experiences, there was a lot of loud activity. I have an apartment that is right on a very busy street. Sometimes late at night, there's a lot of activity, and I don't really mind it as much. I don't mind that too much. It's not negative, but I just wanted to test out the sucker punch, and I turned it on and pointed it at the window, and it was about maybe 11:30 at night, and within 3 minutes it was quiet. And I kind of felt bad, but because I was testing it. And I think Carol or Don Croft had mentioned that what's really going on is it puts people more in touch with their spiritual nature.
Mm-hmm.
Since we're on the topic of interference and Orgonite and being an etheric warrior, I know that you've experienced also interference when you're gifting Orgonite and placing it in certain areas. Can you share some of those stories with the listeners?
Yes, sometimes. And when I go on a gifting mission to distribute Orgonite, I always have my sucker punch with me. It's always on. I never go gifting without it, just to make sure, cops or security or no one no one is able to actually get to me. But we've had people just turn up. Like you mentioned, let's say it's really quiet and we're gifting around in the neighborhood, around the church, and we'll just see someone turn up and maybe with dark sunglasses, really dark sunglasses. They obviously look like agents. In that case, I would either direct the sucker punch at them. When I go on gifting, I always have the sucker punch in my kangaroo pocket. So I either direct the sucker punch at them or boost them away with my heart chakra. And it's been pretty effective. I've had similar experience while gifting a bigger area, park where there's a lot of festival activities, and I worked there last summer, and I couldn't help but noticing all the cell phone towers, and I told myself, this place really needs gifting. And while we were gifting, security came close to us a few times, but again, I would just boost them as they were crossing us, and they never actually stopped us and be like, hey, what are you guys doing? Or it doesn't get to that level. They can't get too close. If you have a sucker punch with you, you become unreachable.
Amazing. Yes, I'll definitely put that to the test this year. Can you share that one incident when you were there was a park with trash in it?
Oh yes, right at the corner of my street. There's a big pile of trash, and it has been there for months. And every time I would pass by, it would depress me a little bit because I would say, who's going to take care of this trash, And it was like house trash, mattress, clothing, stuff like that. And at some point, I threw a tower buster at the pile, and, I took the bus and went to work. And when I came back home, somebody was cleaning the trash. It was no more all over. It was in a pile ready to be picked up by the city. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This trash has been all over, for months. And I threw a little tower buster, and now, a few hours later, it's being taken care of.
Somebody listening would say, that's a coincidence.
Mhm. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them, but when too many coincidences happen, sometimes you at some point you kind of like discard the coincidence.
Now, these are really important personal experiences that give a little bit of confirmation that Orgonite is having an effect. Sometimes there are more obvious confirmations, and I understand something to do with electrical transformers. Can you talk about what happened there?
So we went to gift around my mom's house. And, since she moved there, she got, like, a lot of bad things kind of happened to her. And she got really, really sick. And she just, it's weird to say, but she kind of became evil herself. Okay? And at some point I said, you know what, I need to go gift around this place. Like, I don't recognize my mom anymore, which is weird, because me and her have been really close all our lives. So I went with my friend, and we gifted all around. And, we had dinner, and we didn't stay really long, but we left. And when we got back home, she called me, and she said, as soon as you guys left, there's an electrical transformer that exploded. And I said, are you serious? And she said, yes, the firemen are taking care of that now. And at that moment, I was not really aware of how effective the Orgonite could be, or how the environment reacts. So I asked the previous owner, and she told me that this was a common thing. So it was a good sign for sure.
Lydiane, how is your mother now?
She's much better. She's moving into a new place. I'm really happy that she's moving out. And, I gave her a lot of Orgonite. There was a lot of Orgonite in her house to begin with. And I feel like sometimes the Orgonite takes care, like within a few days, you'll feel better having Orgonite in your home. But on bigger things, it might take longer. Bigger changes might take longer to occur.
That's what you were pointing out in a prior conversation. When you place Orgonite in a specific area, you said that it takes a long time to create the necessary effects. Is that true? Because sometimes there are immediate results, but you're saying that for a full effect, it takes longer. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I say 2-3 weeks is the time frame I always recommend to customers to leave the Orgonite in the same spot. Because if you move it around, the Orgonite, the generator will never have the chance to completely place itself and just take full effectiveness. You know, you'll feel better. A lot of people report, they open their package and they feel really energized right away. So there's some positive effect that's going to happen right away. But let's say for EMF, how can I say this? For EMF protection, whoever is electrosensitive, it might take a little bit longer for the negative effect of the EMF to be dismissed because the Orgonite has to place itself.
That's really good to know.
That is inside the house. We're so bombarded with, computers, cell phone, etc., cable, satellites. There's a lot of the main, sources of EMFs are inside our homes. Because when you're outside and you gift, let's say, a big cell phone tower, electrical tower, it's almost instant. And I think maybe nature has a lot to do with it. The energy is flowing better outside, that is for sure.
Right. From my understanding, it's a reversal of the deadly Orgone radiation into positive Orgone radiation.
Yes.
How did you begin to learn about that it would take like 2 to 3 weeks for Orgonite to establish itself?
The previous owner told me that, and I've witnessed that myself. I remember I had to move at some point, and so I just took a room in someone's house, and I went to visit, and everything was fine, and I didn't stay for really long. When you visit a place, you don't stay for the night. So I moved there, and once I was moved there, I realized that there was a smart meter in the kitchen, and there was a big high-tech router in the living room, and I had trouble sleeping. I couldn't even go in the kitchen and cook for myself because as I would walk into the kitchen, my frontal lobe started hurting, and it was like something was beaming at my head. I was also disoriented. I was just electrosensitive. And me in my house, my internet was wired, and I do very little use of cell phone. I always protected myself from those types of waves as much as I could. I moved there, and I realized I'm actually electrosensitive. It actually bothers me. So I placed a pyramid on the living room floor, and one on top, one smaller one on top of the smart meter. And I slept in my workshop for 2 weeks. And when I came back home, it was all right. I was able to sleep a full night of sleep. I was not disoriented anymore. I was able to go in the kitchen and cook for myself without any discomfort.
Good for you. Okay, that's a really interesting testimony about the 2 to 3 week time period. And I want to even add, because while you were explaining this about the sensitivity to the smart meter and the router, in the movie Take Back Your Power, they talk about how not everybody will have a reaction to microwave radiation emanating or pulsing from a smart meter or coming from a wireless router. However, we all, as human beings, will have a reaction in the blood, whether it's the bottle capping of the red blood cells or the stacking of the red blood cells. Some people will feel that, and other people will not. So there are two types of responses. You immediately feel these effects of heavy microwave radiation presence in a small enclosed place. I can't even begin to understand why somebody would put a smart meter on the inside. On the inside, right?
Yeah, inside, yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. Not only is it's constantly pulsing, but it's sending a wireless signal to the utility company. But really good testimony here that at the very least you could at least get a full night's rest.
Thoughts were also clearer, but I had two roommates and they didn't seem to be bothered by it at all. And I mean, if, let's say you've been around those waves all your life, you've exposed yourself, maybe you're not going to feel the change of energy in your body because that's how it is for you. People are so used to these waves, they don't notice it's there. It doesn't bother them, but it's still there. It still affects their health and moods, but they think they're just being normal because they've grew up with it or they were always around it.
And that's an unfortunate situation. Many of the listeners know not to get used to any of this. Please don't get used to this, just like don't get used to the aerosol operations in the sky. There is a serious effort to socially engineer. A lot of listeners are very tuned into that kind of perception management. Mm-hmm. Let's move into a more subtle realm because you had relayed a story where you were working on making Orgonite, and you would notice a shift in mood. Can you talk about those experiences?
Shift in moods. So when I first started making Orgonite, I would start, let's say, in my workshop. And my workshop is in the music studio, okay? So it gets loud at certain hours. But I remember when I first started making Orgonite, it's like I was getting attacked all the time. It's like someone or something was trying to discourage me. I would walk in the studio and everything would be really quiet and no one would be there, and I would start mixing resin and boom, next door drummer starts playing death metal for hours. But eventually I got etherically stronger, and now when I'm making Orgonite, it's like everything becomes quieter, especially when I'm making tower busters outside. It's like the birds come around, and it's like they're kind of like curious, or I don't know if they know what I'm doing, but everything shuts down, and everything becomes so quiet. That's what I've been experiencing.
You did talk about a strange van.
Yes, that happened. I remember that. I was in my home, and I just started feeling weird, and it's like I started feeling like something was beaming at me. I was getting attacked. I was getting targeted, maybe with frequencies. I'm not sure what it was. And I remember going around the block because I told myself that there's something happening. I don't know what it is, and I went around the block and I saw one suspicious van, and I threw a tower buster under the van, and it was gone a few minutes later. I went back home, and then I went back outside, and the van was gone. And usually the cars that are around my house, they stay there for a while because I have like 2 or 3 garage. There's 2 or 3 garage around the block. So it was a big van with black window. And as soon as the van left, I started feeling better.
So that's a really good defense tactic.
Yes.
So listeners, take note. If you're making Orgonite or you're in a similar situation, some of these tactics could be helpful to you.
And also, I recommend to grid your house with Orgonite outside of your house. bury some tower busters around your home. It's so worth it.
Have you, okay, so you did that for your mom.
Yeah, and for myself too.
The changes occurred for your mom, and then the changes started to occur for you. Were there significant changes that you could talk about?
In my building, I'd say, like no one is like hanging near my front door anymore. That's for sure. And also, I had upstairs neighbor. He was he was something. Okay, there was party all the time, almost every day. It was really hard to get a decent night of sleep, and I gave him a pyramid. Okay, and it took about, I'd say, maybe 8 to 9 months for him to move out, but eventually he did move out. That's what I see sometimes. And, the Orgonite is gonna, and I'm sure he felt somehow calmer, and by having the pyramid, he was really happy when I gave it to him. But for me to take care of the problem, it took longer. It didn't happen overnight. He didn't move out overnight, but he did eventually left.
Did you by chance use the sucker punch?
Not on them. No, I never thought about it. And when you told me about your loud neighbors, I said, hey, that's such a good idea. Because the one in my house is on 24/7, but aiming at the front door. That's the configuration I have. But I never thought about aiming. Now I'm happy he's gone, But I never thought about doing that for noise disturbance. Usually, if I'm in my workshop and I have there's noise disturbance, I'm just gonna play that frequency on my speakers. I'm just gonna play the 15 hertz on my speakers, and then it will calm within minutes as well.
Listeners, if you're just tuning in, we're speaking with Lydiane with QuebecOrgone.com. She's in Montreal, Canada, and has a lot of information to share. Even though she's relatively new to Orgonite and Orgone energy, she dove right into this world and immediately started experiencing a variety of different interferences and interesting responses from customers. Can you give us a couple responses from customers that have had good experiences from the Orgonite that you've sold them?
Oh, yes. Often I get emails, customers saying that they notice a change in the energy in their house, that everything is emotionally calmer, I think when people get Orgonite, it's for a reason. There's obviously issues or problems that needs to be resolved. Customers report, the household being calmer and a better flow of energy. I've had customers reporting. I remember one in particular. She said, "I don't know what's happening. My husband is cleaning his office. He hasn't cleaned his office for 10 years. And I bought the little Orgonite, and now he's cleaning his office. I can't believe it."
Lydiane, have you noticed the relationship with Orgonite and plants in agriculture?
Yes, I mean, in my, I never, there's pictures on my website of it. I never had the chance to build a garden myself, but I've had some customers reporting this mushroom farm got some Orgonite about a year ago, and they've noticed a growth of 5 to 10% increase with the Orgonite in the mushroom farm.
Interesting, Lydiane. Okay, mushrooms, I would think there's a lot of water to make mushrooms, and that structure would definitely respond to Orgonite, positive Orgone energy flowing around it, as many plants would. But that's the first I've heard about mushrooms. Another product that you make, and this is the first I've heard of it, it's called an Implant Killer. Can you describe this product and the effects that it's having?
Yes, the Implant Killer is like a disc with 3 magnets layered in the middle and 4 double terminated quartz wrapped in copper coil. It's like the quartz are doing like a X, and there's the magnet in the middle. There's also kyanite on top of the crystals, and there's one garnet and one amethyst on top of the magnet. I use this disc to disable implants in the body. Don Bradley came with it first, I think so, and it's been very effective for me. And I rarely have reports. It's been effective for friends of mine as well, and I've had a few clients telling me that it really worked for them. Me, I'm 100% convinced it works. The first time I knew I had implants. I knew I had 2 implants at least. I remember having a weird pain in my right calf. And it's the sort of pain that you can't explain to a doctor for some reason. And for the longest time, I had this pain way before I got into Orgonite and other devices. So when I first made my first Implant Killer, I said, okay, let's try it there. And I did, and the next day the pain was completely gone. It never came back. Along with other problems, if I can say, sometimes I would, and I'm sure I'm not the only one experiencing that. I used to go to bed and have these really creepy images, gore images, and I would always ask myself, where do these images come from? I don't really watch TV. I don't watch horror movies or anything like that. Where do these images come from? And at some point, I just started removing my implants. And after some implant removal, it was completely gone. It never happened again. I've noticed an increase of energetic sensitivity after removing my implants. I mean, the Implant Killer is very different than Orgonite. It's not Orgonite. It requires an active process, because Orgonite, you get your Orgonite and you put it there, and that's it in your house. That's it. The Orgonite is going to do its job. It's going to do its work. But the Implant Killer, it's like an active process you have to do for yourself. Search the implants in your body, and personally, as soon as I put the Implant Killer on my body, it's like I kind of know where the implants are, so I just move with the disc. I try to put the magnet on the spot where it tingles, and oftentimes my heart rate goes up, so that's a good indicator. At some point, I gave one to a roommate, and he reported the same. He reported the same process. Like, okay, the magnet has to be on the implant, and it's gonna tingle. It pinches. It feels like the implants feel like small impulses in the body. So it's been very helpful for that. I've noticed a lot of positive changes since I've been using the Implant Killer.
What are your clients or customers saying about the Implant Killer? Do you get feedback from them?
Rarely, but I do. I remember one client in particular said she removed her implant, and she also removed the implant of. She also did the procedure on her mom, and that her mom got better, and that the customer also got better. Sometimes it's those experiences are so personal. Sometimes it's hard to we kind of like don't talk about it type thing. You know what I mean?
Not really. Personal in what way?
Like, I mean, if you have implants, let's say I have these. For me, for years, I had intrusive images, intrusive thoughts. I never talked about it to anyone. It's something you feel like no one's going to understand, and some things that is just happening to you, and you don't really know how to break the ice, or you don't want to come out as a weirdo if you're like, hey, have you ever, experienced that? And then people look at you in a weird manner. It can affect us in so many ways that we're not even aware of. I mean, I have another maybe testimonial that I just remember.
For the Implant Killer?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so at some point, somebody contacted me, and they were in really, really bad shape. And I remember meeting him. Usually, I don't meet customers, but he sounded in such bad shape. I told myself I have to meet this guy. So I met him and sold him the Implant Killer, and he would tell me that he had he appeared normal, completely normal, but he kept saying that he was sane, but he kept saying that he thought he was gonna die, and that they were people with, black hooded people were purchasing, following him, coming after him, all in his imagination, And so I sold him the Implant Killer and gave him, the instructions, and I said, call me back tomorrow. And he called me back the next day, and he said, you know what, I've started removing implants. I feel better, but I have about like 25 implants at head level. And I remember thinking to myself, this is so extreme. 25 at head level is a lot of implants in one region, So he kept using the Implant Killer, and eventually he just started feeling better and better and better, and started taking better care of himself. Like he got himself in this situation, if I can say. Sometimes belief systems can be very dangerous, in my opinion. So I think he was involved with quite dark stuff, but the Implant Killer was kind of able to bring him back. As he was removing the implant, he started feeling more and more himself, and was able to take a better decision for himself.
Are you actually seeing, because you're saying removal, do you mean disabling? Because do you remove an implant? Do you see it afterward, or does it just dissolve, or what's going on?
I've never seen an implant, but I remember some, and I feel like there's a lot of different sort of implants too. There's a lot of different types of implants too. I remember going to an appointment, and I was walking, and at some point I felt something stung me in my back, and I stopped moving, and I said, what is this? And I really started like panicking, and it hurt, it really hurt, and I told myself, did I just got implanted? That's how it felt, like somebody shot something from a long distance. And I turned around, and I remember, like I said, when you're an etheric warrior, you know when these things are happening. It's like we have a sixth sense for it. And I remember turning around and seeing some sketchy trucks in the back, and I said, did that thing just come from there? And I went home, and I used the Implant Killer on myself. And I feel like that kind of like took care of it. But I think some implants are physical for sure, but some implants are also energetical or karmic as well.
Well, Lydiane, this has been a very interesting interview. You've confirmed a lot of the effects and interesting effects of Orgonite, but also the interference. It parallels a lot of what other etheric warriors have said in previous interviews. You've never had a single return of an Orgonite device from QuebecOrgone. If listeners want to reach out to you or learn more about your website, tell them how to do that.
Yes. They can I mean, there's the contact form on the website, QuebecOrgone.com. There's also my phone number, so they can call and leave a message with their number if they have any questions. It's going to be my pleasure to answer and give the information.
Well, Lydiane, I want to thank you for being on In Other News. I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Thanks to you. Thanks for having me.